If you're helping your child grow their confidence in English, subscribe to this channel. I share strategies that help kids move from understanding English to expressing their ideas clearly and confidently. So, my English Confidence Club helps children ages 8 to 12 speak with confidence, and they are small groups, there are real conversations, and real progress. So, the link is in the description, and spots are limited. Okay, so good grades don't always equate to confident speaking. And this is shocking and surprising to so many parents. And it makes sense once you understand why. So, a good grade can mean that your child can recognize, remember, and reproduce English on paper under controlled situations, usually with rehearsed phrases, right? Our real conversation means that your child has to think on the spot. They have to create English from scratch in real time with another human being waiting for a response. These are two genuinely different skills, and school almost always measures the first one, while life requires the second, right? Your child's grade's not lying, and neither is their silence. They are just measuring two completely different things. All right. So if you would like your child to join the English Confidence Club, go ahead and check out the link in my description. I have small groups for ages 8 to 12, and it helps children really go from understanding to speaking confidently and clearly. So these small groups, we have awesome conversations about topics they love. You know, some students are talking about Minecraft, the World Cup, all of these awesome things that are going on right now. Some people are sharing about sharks or their pets. You know, pets are always welcome. So we'll have kids with their dogs or they'll bring their cats. It'll be walking across the computer. Um, so, yeah, that's some awesome parts of our English Confidence Club. So remember, spots are really limited. I'd love to get your child in. Check out that link in the description if you are interested. Okay, and again, tests measure what your child knows, and speaking measures what your child can actually do. So, this is a distinction that changes how parents think about English progress. So, knowing and doing are two completely different skills, right? And English is no exception. So, a child can know every single grammar rule and still have nothing to say in a real conversation. A child can spell every word correctly and still freeze when someone speaks to them. So the gap between knowing English and using English is closed with one thing only. And we close that gap with speaking practice. You guessed it. If you watched any of my videos, you know speaking practice is huge, critical for language learning, right? So if we think about it, what is the goal of language learning? So you can pause, you can think about it here. Once you're ready, you have an answer. I would say the main goal for all of my students is communication, right? Communicating with people who speak English, or when I'm teaching Spanish, communicating with people who are speaking Spanish, right? This is the main goal. And how do we normally communicate? Speaking, right? So this is an awesome way to close that gap, and it's critical here. All right, so in a test, your child has time to think. They have time to choose the right answer, revisit it if they need to, and check their work. But in real conversations, there is no time to stop and to think. The other person is right there. They are waiting, right? So speaking is a skill that only improves with real practice. You cannot study your way to fluency. The only way to get to be a fluent speaker in whatever language you're learning is speaking, right? So every conversation, your child is doing something that no test prep or a lot of schools can't prepare them for, right? This is why kids who speak regularly improve faster than kids who study more but speak less. So my students who take 2, 3, I've had students take up to 10 hours of a week of class. These students are the ones who are improving exponentially quicker than my students who take one 30-minute class, right? So these are the ones who stay consistent. They take those 10 hours, 5 hours, 3 hours, week after week, and they will improve much faster than their peers who either aren't taking any lessons or are just doing a normal maybe a typical boring grammar lesson as an additional lesson. They aren't actually speaking and talking about things that they're passionate about. Okay, again, going back to school. So, unfortunately, even in my language learning experience with Spanish as my second language, um, many English classes and language classes all over the world, really, they spend very, very little time on actual speaking. And there's lots of restrictions, right? Your schedule, etc. There's certain things that teachers have to cover in the curriculum. Um, but yeah, this is where it tends to be a little bit scripted and low pressure, right? We need that speaking. So kids learn about English, right? Instead of learning how to use it. So this is the huge difference between these two things, right? So a good grade doesn't mean your child can have a real conversation with a native speaker. It means they understand the rules of English on paper in that controlled setting. This isn't a criticism of schools or other language courses. It's just the reality of what classroom English or classroom Spanish or any other classroom language is designed to measure, right? So that speaking gap is almost always something that needs to be filled outside of school. So it's always incredible to me when I have students who are learning English in school, then they come to me and how quickly their English progresses. It's unbelievable and always so exciting to see. All right, so speaking to a real person feels completely different from a written test. So the stakes feel higher, the exposure feels greater, right? And the fear of making mistakes in front of others is one of the most common reasons children and adults really freeze. It's completely understandable. I've been there when I'm learning a language. Have you guys been there as well, either with language learning or even just in a social setting, right? So that fear, it doesn't mean your child is bad at English. It means they need like a safe, low pressure environment to practice. And confidence only grows in safe, low pressure environments. So you can't pressure your child into confidence. You can only create the conditions where it grows naturally. And this is the type of environment of speaking practice where it matters. The speaking practice matters as much as the practice itself. So schools teach grammar and vocab, but not conversational skills, and those are completely different things. So your child may know the words, but they won't know how to use them naturally in that flowing conversation or a dynamic conversation where a native speaker doesn't give a textbook answer, right? They are going to have different answers. They'll use slang, they'll use phrases that maybe they didn't learn on the textbook. So, how do you start a conversation? How do you respond when you do not understand? How do you keep it going when you run out of things to say about this topic? These are skills that need to be explicitly practiced, and they don't come from automatically knowing grammar rules, right? Real English is not textbook English, and conversational skills are almost never what gets tested or focused on. Again, how to think in English is so important, not to translate. I encourage students from day one not to translate from their native language. And this is really the shift that separates my intermediate learners from fluent speakers. And how to keep that conversation going naturally, that back and forth, the follow up questions, the reactions. That's all a skill, right? And again, how to speak with real people in a real situation. Unpredictable, unscripted, uncontrolled. Think about something, like maybe you lost your luggage and you're in a foreign country. You need to use your English or your other language to help you describe that. You didn't predict you were going to lose your luggage. It's completely unscripted, and you can't control it. So you have to figure out, you have to adapt and be really fluid and able to roll with the punches is a great phrase we say in English. And these three things are not in most school curriculums, and they're exactly what real speaking confidence requires. So this is part of the gap, right? And it's fillable with the right practice, the right structure, and the right support. Again, native speaker. So somebody who's a native speaker, all that means is their first language is, for me, I'm a native English speaker because my first language is English. I am not a native Spanish speaker. I speak Spanish, but I am not a native Spanish speaker because English is my first language, not Spanish. So, again, think about your language, whatever it may be: Mandarin, Turkish, Spanish, French, Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. There's so many different beautiful languages out there. Think about how different it is when you're speaking with your best friend or your family members or your child versus what you learn on a textbook. Two completely different things, right? Again, native speakers are real. They use natural English, not textbook English, right? The rhythm, our pronunciation, the contractions, the informal phrases, the idioms, all of it, right? So children learn, especially, I really, really recommend if you have a young child, get them into English lessons as soon as possible specifically with a native English speaker. They will learn the pronunciation, the sounds, the phonics so much better as a young child versus as an adult. It's unbelievable the difference versus from a kid who learns English, from somebody who is a later learner, an adult, a late teen. It's crazy the difference it can make. So children really learn rhythm, tone, and natural conversation flow through exposure that no grammar lesson could ever replicate, right? And regular practice with this native speaker builds his confidence faster than almost anything else, right? The familiarity of hearing and responding to natural English is what makes real conversations feel less scary over time. And this is the single biggest gap between kids who test well and kids who speak confidently. It's access to real conversation practice with a real or a native speaker of whatever language you're learning. Okay, again, group classes are huge for building confidence. So children practice with other learners at the same level. Nobody feels behind, nobody feels shown up. Everybody feels accepted here, right? It's a low pressure, high support environment, and the group dynamic removes that spotlight that sometimes it can create if it's a one on one class. So, again, real conversations every lesson. There's no drills. It's not just focusing on worksheets, it's back and forth communication. And kids get so excited. I usually do a meme check in at the beginning of class. So, like a picture of 9 animals, and they have to say, oh, I feel like number 6 because the guinea pig feels happy. And I feel happy because I get to come to English class and meet my new student or my new classmates. That's what I had a student say this week, and it was so sweet and heartwarming. So students really feel good and excited, and the learning just comes easily when they're in a group class. So there's something powerful about a child realizing other kids are on the same journey, and it normalizes the struggle and it makes the process feel shared, right? And again, this is what I offer in my English Confidence Club. So there are real conversations with me, a real native English speaker, every single week. It's not scripted. It's really dynamic, and it's based on what your child loves. It's based on your child's interests. So, for example, it's turning into spring. So we're talking about seasons around the world, right? For some of my students in Uruguay, it is more like a fall or an autumn, right? But in the Northern Hemisphere, we are experiencing spring. So we talk about things that they like to do, and all the changes that are happening. So again, small groups of children ages 8 to 12 at the same level, and everyone belongs and everyone is challenged appropriately. So it's a safe and fun environment where every child is supported. Mistakes are expected, celebrated, and never used against them. So if your child tests well but won't speak, this is exactly the missing piece that you've been looking for. So the links in the description, spots are limited, and I'd love to work with your child and meet them. All right, so remember, parents, good test grades are great, but speaking practice is essential. So go ahead, celebrate the grades, and then go ahead and find the confidence, right? Look for opportunities. There are so many opportunities to be exposed. Maybe right now it's out of your price range to meet with a native English speaker. That's okay. There's still so many ways that you can practice. There's YouTube resources. Maybe there's someone in your local library or local school who's a native English speaker. Maybe you could just seek out these informal conversations where you're practicing English. Um, these opportunities are everywhere just once you start looking for them. Again, if you are able to afford it, find that native speaker your child can practice with regularly. So consistency with the right practice partner changes everything. And again, these three things together close that gap between knowing and using English. Your child already has the knowledge, now they just need the practice. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope this explains something that's been maybe confusing or frustrating for a while. So good grades and speaking confidence are both worth celebrating. They just need different things to grow. So go ahead, drop in the comments, does your child do well on tests but struggle to read? Or to speak. I read every comment, and I genuinely want to know how many families are experiencing this. I know a lot of my current students have shared this, the parents have shared this with me. And if this video has helped you, please go ahead and share it with one other parent. It really helps me reach and help other students, which I'm trying to reach as many English or kids who are learning English as possible. And I really would love if you could allow me the opportunity to share this with a family member, a friend, a classmate. This would be a great way to improve their English. And if you aren't subscribed yet, go ahead, hit that button. I'm here twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, with real strategies for parents who want real results for their kids. So I will see you in the next one.